This video will provide clarification on the purpose of the primary and secondary tabs in the patient ability. It is a common misconception among MacPractice users that the primary and secondary tabs in the patient ability refer to the patient's primary and secondary insurance. The primary and secondary tabs are where the insurance information is entered, but the primary and secondary tabs do not always equal to be the patient's primary and secondary insurance. Rather, these tabs refer to the person who is primarily or secondarily financially responsible for the patient account in question. The primary and secondary insurance is actually determined by the order the insurance is listed under the patient tab and then within the insurance subtab. MacPractice will recognize the top listed insurance as the patient's primary insurance. You can click and drag the insurance items into the proper order so that the top insurance is the primary insurance and the bottom insurance is the patient's secondary insurance. To help illustrate this concept, let's go through a couple examples. For our first example, our patient here is married and is insured through their spouse. The patient themselves does not carry their own insurance. However, the patient is still responsible for making sure their account is paid off in a timely fashion. So, in this scenario, the patient's information would go into the primary tab since they are primarily responsible for their account financially. Now, rather than re-entering the patient's information a second time into the primary tab, there is a shortcut to copy their information over to that tab. First, start on the tab that contains the patient information, in this case, the patient tab. Next, hold down the Option key on your keyboard and simultaneously click on the tab you would like to copy their information over to. This will then proceed to fill in all of their information as it was entered initially on the patient tab. Keep in mind that this shortcut can be done from any one tab to another. Next, the spouse's information would be entered in the secondary tab. The insurance would also be added to the secondary tab since the insurance does belong to the spouse. Once you have entered in this insurance record, navigate back to the patient tab and then navigate to the insurance subtab. Here, you will see the patient will only have one insurance listed, which would, of course, be seen as the primary insurance by MacPractice. Building on the above example, let's say the patient also carries their own insurance, which they happen to use as secondary coverage. In this case, the patient would still be listed in the primary tab, with their spouse in the secondary tab. You would then add the patient's insurance under their primary tab, since the patient is the subscriber to this insurance. Next, if you go back to the insurance subtab under the patient tab, you would need to ensure that the spouse's insurance is listed on top and the patient's secondary insurance is listed on the bottom to ensure that MacPractice will properly identify the primary and secondary insurances. For our final example, let's say that we have a family account consisting of two parents, Roger and Jane, and two children, Sally and Bobby. For this example, the father and the children are all insured through the father's insurance, and the mother is insured through her own insurance. She is not covered by the father's insurance in any way, and the father and children are not covered by the mother's insurance in any way. In this scenario, you could choose whether the father and mother would be listed in the primary or the secondary tab. Next, we must navigate to the individual patient files of the father and children. For their files, under that insurance subtab, you would uncheck the Enable checkbox for the mother's insurance. Similarly, under the mother's insurance subtab in her patient file, you would uncheck the Enable checkbox associated with the father's insurance. This will ensure that all family members are kept on one account, but it will prevent claims from going to the incorrect insurance. And this concludes covering the distinction between the primary and secondary tabs and the primary and secondary insurance.